Warm welcome to Alejandro Olarte.
Thank you. And so you're talking, crank your voice. So I choose to sit here because I would like to conduct some experiments together. Then for that I would like to be in about the same place where you are listening. So I will be turning my head, trying to not give the back to all of you all the time. So I'm Alejandro Olarte. I work at the Sibelius Academy in the electroacoustic music area. My main interest is the performance, electroacoustic music performance. It involves a very large set of possibilities and options. I work with I like very much sound synthesis. I like experimental electronic music, and I am also towards the end of my own research, doctoral research in pedagogical tools for electroacoustic performance, live electronics. And I would like to split my presentation into two parts. One will be about supercollider as a tool for working with multi-channel system with some basic approaches and a second one of a topic that I started to investigate very recently, so it's very fresh, and that is about the audio rate modulations of space parameters. Mm-hmm. So if how many of you are not familiar with supercollider? If you show me your hand too.
Not really.
Okay. No, you got about 50% of the room. So my idea is not try. I'm not coming here to sell you supercollider. First, because it's free. I am a very bad seller already. And second is because it may fit somebody's workflow, or it may not. So I think what I would like mostly to communicate to you is to an approach of research and synthesis and space simultaneously. So supercollider is another tool, as many other software tools or hardware tools. You use it when you need it. It's very good for some things. It's not very good for other things. So I like the idea of a tool, because it makes me think like sometimes you're trying to fix a problem with a hammer, and that makes me think, in a quote that says, if you have an electrical problem, no, if you have a problem and you can't solve with a hammer, it's an electrical one. But it's a different tool, so it's very good for experimenting with signals and with DSP graphs, so we'll call interconnecting modules. It's in the same vein that MaxMSP and Pure Data. You have objects that belongs to a predefined class library, and then you call instances of it, and then you make connections. But the main difference is that you don't make the connections with patch cords, but you make the connections by embedding the objects one into each other through variables or straight into one. So it's very possible to make translations from different patches from one language to another. But that's not the main point, of course. So it's a very good tool that for experimenting with signals, and it's a very good tool for multi-channel work, because it has a property, built-in property that called multi-channel expansion, that allows every single signal to be duplicated in any amount of desirable lines. I will give you very soon an example. And because of that, is very practical for polyphonic purposes. You know, when expanding the signals into many loudspeakers that in this case, or if you are working in a stereo, you can still use it, all these virtual channels or virtual split of signals, and then combine in different forms. So it's a language based. If we look something like this, it has basically two parts. One is the language. This is where you write your comments, your signals, your Eugen graphs, unit generators. This is a unit generator, the sine oscillator, for example, and a server that is the DSP calculator. So it's the part of the program that takes care of the audio processing. Now, having those two separated has a lot of advantages. One being, for example, that you can have one server running and different clients talking to that server. For example, if I don't run the server in my machine, I can be playing in a server that is in a local network, and we all could play from that. And the opposite is true as well. So you could have many servers running simultaneously and being controlled by one instance of the language. Yes. So and this separation is not obvious in language like pure data, and when the sound processing, the DSP processing, and the language are built in together in one program. So actually, SuperCollider are two programs. One for calculations, like if I stop the server, I can still make calculations, routines, number crushing, and the server can have a very high priority in the CPU thread. So if something crashes in the language, the audio has higher priority. So you still can have, even if SuperCollider quits, like in your graphical interface and everything quits, the server can still keep running, and you can give back control of it. So that's one of the advantages of having this architecture of separate process of language and server. Language and processing, DSP processing. Good. So let's make a little sound. Start with some sound experiments. So I have run now the server. The server is connected to the MADI phase. And I get all the channels visible now to the interface. So at the beginning there was the sine oscillator. I know at the beginning there was noise. No? How the story goes. Now at the beginning there was an impulse response. And then the universe convoluted forever. So let's start with an impulse response. So when we have an attack, this will be playing. Yeah. Channel number 1. You hear that? No? Don't want to play too loud, because signals are digital signals in SuperCollider are like digital signals as in Max, but you get the full dynamic range. It's very okay. So we got an input that has a frequency, yeah, and now I'm addressing here the channels of where does it play. Channel 18, 19. 20. Okay, so this is the idea. You see, there is a function that is between curly brackets that has a unit generator that receives some arguments, so inputs, and the input in this case is the frequency, and it plays true. S is the server, so now it's connected to the MADI phase, and channel. So multi-channel expansion is when you have a list. For example, this. Now this will be a list of frequencies. 4 in this case. That will be then generate 4 instances of the sine oscillator. Yeah. So what I will expect with this code is to play the 4 sphere channels with different frequencies. Okay, we'll lower the volume a bit, always from the same side. Yep. So it's not, of course, it's not very difficult to move to from a list once you have a list generator, an array, to now for the 22 channels. Sorry, yes, 23 is our base. That one. That's the base. So 22 frequencies playing over the 22 loudspeakers. Yes. Okay. Increase the volume. So when I look at my meter, just to confirm. Now this is something that I don't know what it is. Montaus.
It happened to me as well.
Okay. Where's, I wonder if it's a clock in. Is Mantas somewhere? No. No, but that doesn't matter. During sound test, it came a couple of times, and I think we'd be a.
I think it's
so
the
kind of
clock thing.
Yes.
Where is the clock coming from? Have you checked in the fire phase, or what's it called, the setup for the?
Yes, it's setting internal. What is the?
It's supposed to be the MODI.
Yeah. The MIDI optical, the second setting.
Okay, so before making a digital explosion, I quit.
Yes. That's a wise idea.
Yeah. Digital clocks are, and then okay, we lower the volume. This master now. You also.
No, I think it shouldn't be a problem, but we can. Yes.
Okay. I have been in front of the digital clocks a couple of times. I prefer to spend time doing this. Okay, good.
So
So
main as well, because main is 1 2.
it's
MIDI optical.
MADI optical. Okay, so it's the slave.
Yeah, now it should be fine.
Good. So I come back. Yeah.
Yeah, just now gaming.
Switch on.
Yeah.
Come back slow.
And also main in the total mix, the rightmost one is also, it's one speakers 1 2.
This is coming to me. Okay.
Yeah.
Are they now in the -10? Yes. Good. So we were here.
Is it better or?
Well, let me hear.
It was some sort of clicking noise.
Yeah.
It was.
Like digital-
It was clock problem. Yeah.
Out of sync. Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
No clicking noise.
No clicking noise. Good. So we got in a very compact presentation like this. So a few characters over a line. Control over the 22 loudspeakers. Yes. Without need of creating instances. So it's a built-in quality of this tool that make it very practical for addressing different channels. Do you believe me on that point, or?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Good. So let's keep moving on. Now I prepare examples that are either addressing the speaker per speaker. So when you have one channel going into this speaker, one channel into the speaker, or equal power panning between speakers. I'm not addressing the ambisonic or bebop or other techniques that you will probably see later on with Hans Peter. So because I wanted to, once I want to open up the topic of supercrite, another one to spend a little bit of time with the audio rate. Yes, but there is also the built-in possibilities of working with ambisonic. I did prepare, but now after the morning tests, I decided not to do it. There are libraries for bebop speakers, and mostly I am not doing it also because I don't have the configuration files ready for this system, and that will take me more to prepare. You need the angles, the distance and angles of the speakers to make some sensible sense. Some meaningful sense of those. So we will stick into one sound per channel or equal power panning. Now, after this, I would like to. I have here one classic example of synthesis. It's a very simple, from very well known in the analog domain. You have a resonant low pass filter, so the input of the signal is what is now nested in the first layer. So it's a wave at a very low frequency, and the frequency of the filter is being modulated by another saw, which frequency is controlled by a noise generator. Yeah, classic. Resonant low pass filter fitted with a very complex signal, very rich signal, and then the same type of signal, a low frequency saw, sweeping towards the frequency of the filter. Very analog techniques. Okay, now we can hear and see that there are these two. There is a list of frequencies there that make that now we have two channels running. These first two. Yeah. And if it was written in a synthesizer form, then we could. Sorry. We could change the position without stopping, but. Okay, so let's do apply the same concept of multi-channel expansion, just to so we made one linear distribution of possibilities of 22 loudspeakers, where the minimum frequency will be 515 and then the maximum will be 15.1. And that's it now. Wow, I was checking. Is it me or the screen is also modulating? I'm playing at minus 30 dBs out of Super Collider. Okay? See that? Taking one of the partials. Let's go. Visual analysis. Means that I got a good base now. I can measure it. Wow. Okay. Good. Did you see? So the spatial effects come from this very tiny shifts in frequency between the instances of the of the algorithm. Yep. Good. So keeping on this topic of addressing one signal per speaker, I would like to introduce now the discussion about modulations. So modulations is in this content we will define it as changing over the time of one parameter. Yes. I was while thinking about this, I thought that if sound by itself, many people will describe it in maybe outside music as a modulation, and it's true because it's the modulation of the air pressure over time. But so that modulation has basically two parameters. One is the depth or the intensity of the modulation, the wideness, like how wide it is the modulation, and the other one is the frequency. Okay, now the frequency is what we will be looking at it today. Is it can go. Our limits are the limits of the digital domain, because it goes from it can go from a very slow modulation that can take, you know, from many seconds to minutes to hours to days to years to, so in that expansion, the LFO of the or the low frequency oscillation of time is as fast as you get energy on the computer to run and patience to listen to it, but at the other end, the boundary is done by the sampling rate and the Nyquist theorem. You cannot go faster than what your hardware can do it. So. But in between, so there are so very different steps that create different perceptions, as we know from the frequency modulation paradigm. We at low frequency modulation of an oscillator will create more changes on pitch, slow changes on pitch, and then when the oscillator reaches the audio rate, it means over 20 hertz, around 20 hertz, and beyond, then a complex spectrum appears. Yep. So, and this is also something that I would like to we consider for a little while how far electronic music it can be one step beyond the mechanical world, because there are things that electrical signals can do that are not doable with mechanics, and then digital signal had also give us a very fine control of some of those processes to make them also very abstract. I don't find another word to define it. Yes, for example, when if you think of frequency modulation in the acoustic world, what would that be?
It would be vibrato, right?
String.
Yes, string,
Yeah.
vibrato. So it will be the amount of if we think in a guitar, so the amount of that you go up and down the pitch, that your depth, but that's already like probably just a third in a very loose string guitar, and then the speed is how fast you will go. Now we can immediately figure out that that we can reach more than eventually 4 times in a second. I don't know what the guitar specs will say. 4 is okay. And that's really low compared with what audio modulation means. Yes, audio modulation will start around 20. So if you could do that 20 times in a second, you will start to get into the LFO. And then if you go 1,000 times per second, then we will start to hear some frequency modulation. But you see how abstract is this? It's impossible. No? You would or tuning, moving the tuning peg of the guitar at that speed, up and down. So we will enter a domain that is very abstract. And if we, well, maybe I will come back to this. First, let's listen to discrete channel frequency modulation per collider. I prepare an example, mostly with the purpose of showing the algorithm. It's as in any other language, Max and C++, it looks the same. You have a modulator, as an oscillator, where you control the frequency. This will be now the tuning argument. So if you multiply by 1, it's just the frequency, but with 1.1 you can start shifting the main frequency. And a modulator. So I say the modulator and the carrier frequency. And now this signal has been called mod, and mod gets added to the carrier frequency with the operator plus. And then we got an envelope controlling the amplitude, in this case, that has a very sharp attack and a scaling factor. So if the time scale goes 2, then the envelope will last 2 seconds. The release is 1 in this case. So if this value is 4, then it will last 4. Okay, and there is no here is the multiplication of the envelope times the carrier, and that's it. So it's very nothing special on it. Enter the. But what is special in Super Collider is the way where you play it. So we will play it through our output. This number will be every time a different number. Every time that I generate an instance of that synthesizer that I call an FM instance of this code, it will be played over a different loudspeaker. So it's a mono synthesizer, but at each instance will go. Now the other parameters are also to start. I know algorithmic is not random, but we will start with this first code is running linear probabilities of each of the parameters in a very specific range. So this is how it sounds. here below we have another score. Let's call it score. The tradition of the Music 5 and.
Is it possible to get hold of this code? I'm trying to like copy it, but it's a bit too fast.
Oh yeah, if you're interested, I can give you a.
Would it be fun to just like try out?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's.
Please send it to us all.
I can. Is that? But as I said, there's nothing magic there so far.
No, it's just fun to have something.
Okay, good. Now, now this code here, I prepare it with different distributions. It means that not the randomness, the values are selected not in a linear way, but according to other probabilistic techniques, for example, Brownian motion or Gauss or exponential randomness, etc. And then it will sound. This is much more slower. I have given now the possibility of the duration of between the instances, between each sound, to be up to 10 seconds. So it could be very spare. And this code can be run without stopping, can be updated. Increasing the density of events. So it's just a classic algorithm, but played with the facilities of multi-channel possibilities of supercolliding. Okay, that's all. So I think that's what I wanted to show you. Basically, this first approach of addressing speakers with different signals, by creating lists of unit generators. Now, about the topic of spatial audio rate modulations, well, it happens almost by accident. Moving now, we will look at the power equal power panning. But and when you have an LFO panning over the 22 loudspeaker, for example, a saw will go up to 22 every time. Yes, we will listen to that. So it's a matter of a number to move into the audio rate, where that's the frequency of the LFO will take you to the audio rate. And then I start to working with this. I start to hear some interesting effects, and then I discovered that there are people very interested in this topic. One of them is Ryan McGee, who has written a paper in the 2015 called Spatial Modulation Synthesis, where he's describing exactly that, how affecting the parameters of a space algorithm and the audio rate will generate different perceptual and perceptual and digital mathematical results, or sonic results. Now the paper evaluated in a thesis that is available also. He has put his dissertation paper online, scanning spaces, presence of spatial sonification and synthesis. But the thesis covered a larger aspect of his building also a visualization algorithm and a tool for analysis. So, if you're interested in the whole thing, I will refer to the dissertation. But if you want the details of most of it is also in the thesis, but this is the very concrete to the point kind of paper of so I would like to make a couple of experiments with you and then have a conclusion point. So it's an opening. But as I said before, now let's think what would that mean in the physical world, the audio rate modulations of the space.
Instruments around you and playing with audio rate.
For example, yeah, that would be the first. So if you have a violin, and the violin is moving around us, so it will take to go around us. It will take a couple of seconds. So now, if we put that violinist in a fan, so we will start to get some LFO action. And if we speed it up at the audio rate, then we will have some kind of audio rate modulation of a space parameter, right? Now, if you apply this to an algorithm like ambisonic or in bebop, or where you have control of, for example, turning the whole space field, or contracting, stretching the space field. Now that's impossible in the physical world. We cannot contract the space and open it up, contract and open it up at the audio rate. Okay, so this is very abstract. It's very mathematical, and it's something. The results of this, I believe, most of it are not what you will expect. Making some experiments with different algorithms give very different results. So I think most of it has to do with the limits of computational and a lot of aliasing, because when you reach the audio rate, what happens is that if your modulator has a spectrum that will hit very very fast into the Nyquist frequency, and that will produce aliasing and will bring intermodulations artifacts all around. So eventually, I guess somebody will take this project over and it will develop in a more fine tool for working. So let's spin the violinist around. Oh man, now I feel bad because I don't have a violinist. I have. Let me see.
Here's a violin in the corner.
It's volunteering? Somebody? Okay, let me review this code for a little while.
This is the audio funfair.
I will have to use it here, yes. Okay, this is the second example. I'll take this one step down here. Exactly like this. I reveal my code. This is the second example where I'm trying to integrate the Doppler effect. But before, we need to listen to this and see this. Forgot to adjust the pitch.
I was expecting violin.
I said I don't have a violin. Okay.
It's like an animal song.
I think that could be great.
I mean, that's violin, just modulate it, yeah?
That's how it sounds when you spin it too much. Okay, so in this code we have our roster, and now I am controlling the position of it over the 22 with the mouse. Yeah. But instead of a mouse, let's use an LFO. Well, an oscillator. So when we do, now it takes 10 seconds to go all around the 22 loudspeakers, yeah?
Yeah, but file is still playing, yeah? It's not starting from...
Yeah, no. The file is continuously playing, but then now this equal power panning is moving the image of the sound file from one speaker to the next, and then yes, according to the oscillator. So let's increase the frequency to reach the audio rate. 1. Four times in a second. I knew I was doing something wrong with my code. Don't say is this. Oh, it's in the camera. Oh, forget about the fan.
We'll have the animal rights people.
Yes. Okay, but let's go to 100. Yeah? No. Let's go slow. Listen to the process. 20 hertz. That's 100 hertz. No, 400 hertz. Let's change this into a sine oscillator. Okay, now we'll change the sound file. Where was my buffer? One. Okay, I have a problem with my other sound file, but okay, did you hear the effect? How does it sound? Does it sound familiar? What it is?
Bit crush.
Oh, it sounds, yeah, bit crush, kind of.
Amplitude modulation.
Yes, exactly.
Modulation.
Amplitude modulation. The spectral is also very familiar to the amplitude modulation. Now, what happened with the perception of the space? Like what? Sorry?
It's thinned out.
It's still there?
I felt like it had more depth when it was the slower it was moving. You
Okay.
could sense you could localize the source in a way.
So what if we try now with our analog patch? So if instead of spinning the sound file, we will use the okay. So we start in the sub audio frequencies.
Could you change it so it's just one sawtooth? So instead of being, because now it's multi-channel expanded, so
Yep,
I
let's
think
leave it
it's
one.
maybe, yeah.
So it goes up and then down. It's a sine oscillator modulating, no? So the space, the space trajectory is very clear. So we go now without talking, accelerating the modulator. That was too much. Fine.
Why is it that one speaker seems to stick out? Is that one?
No, there is somewhere else.
Depends on the frequency.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course.
Maybe it becomes two times in amplifying something.
You didn't try it. Yeah, you didn't try above the nucleus.
Again, let's go there. Since it's just a number.
That is above it.
I'm reaching, getting there.
Oh,
Ah.
wow. We go back to zero. Because that is both theoretical and practically so.
Okay,
Back at
so that's back, and it's in only one speaker.
back to the
But wait,
back.
how it happened?
I said,
It's not so
oh,
obvious.
time is over.
You want
Well-
to say that everything was cancelled but this speaker? With
Yes,
this frequency? How?
I think there are many factors involved with that we are not fully on control. Once mathematically, second the algorithm, the UGENs and the mathematics of it is not necessarily optimized for this kind of operations.
And the SC synth might have a limit to how fast. I mean, it might compare the the sample rate to what frequency you're trying to do with the AR regions.
Yes, it will probably warp.
It might be supercollider stopping us from getting aliasing or something.
It could be that it warps the frequency. Could be.
Yeah.
So, but it's an interesting phenomenon. Now I had prepared other topics, like for example the things that are not included on that experimentation. For example, the Doppler effect. I just played shortly. If I scrap 2 minutes less. Where here there is a listener in a position, and then there is a source moving towards it, losing frequency with a delay line. Okay, maybe I do it a bit.
Clearly squeezed.
But now now there is a frequency compensation of related to the motion. Now this is not the best example for that. Let's change it to this. Doppler compensation, and then of course now the time will be modulating the Doppler effect. I finished with that, promise. So this is our time. So now when we are at this is 1, speed of 1, speed of 10. Audio rate Doppler. Or frequency modulation through the Doppler parameters. One more step. And I don't want to explode your... Everybody has a low pass. Activate it. We go down and... Just put a number here. Okay. Good. I hope this is bringing a topic that could be a topic of research for many to experiment. Now I was thinking how to do it in Reaper, and I don't see any possible way. Max could eventually do it, I guess.
Yeah, but this kind of things are really good with coding, I guess.
There's another library, what I have not tried out, not the ICST Ambisonics, where you can drive the position in audio rate, and
yes,
probably you could do similar things with that.
There's a huge section of LFOs in Reaper, but I don't know if there's any frequency.
It goes until 100, I think, something like 100.
Yeah, it can go very slow, but
actually,
yes.
if you input the slider has limit, but if you input number manually, it actually activates that number as well. But
you have to play with it, yeah, because it tries to play the graphical interface, so you are limited by the refreshing rate of the.
Yes, but then there's also audio sources can modulate. So if you create an audio source,
but the amplitude.
Yes, yes.
The amplitude of the.
I think you could create JS effect in Reaper, which does something like that. You know, the scripting.
Can I just ask one simple question after closing time? It seems to me that this expansion that you are proposing, it's a form of ring modulation, going into space. And we know, for example, from ring modulation, we can actually calculate the frequencies resulting. There's a summation formula and as well as a difference formula. And we also know there are tools like to separate those things. If you pass it via Hilbert transform, you can, for example, isolate just the summation part and the difference part. And it sounds completely different. It doesn't give this rough kind of quality. And I would like to know, have you had ideas about this? Because it's very clear to me why this is ring modulation. It's equal power panning, so it's amplitude based. And when you move around, you're actually changing the gains of every speaker very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So it's obvious in a sense. So I think in terms of coming to control this idea, you would have to control the same type of controls that you would employ in modulations.
I agree exactly. But what I'm most interested in that was what happened with the space, the perception of the space, because we move and there are regions of instability that, for example, that are not in the audio rate, that is just in the limit of the perception of a trajectory. Like when it moves from the trajectory to the ring modulated partial, and then you have the feeling that partials are everywhere. It's like an omni ring modulator. So I think there are things, and things to investigate. For example, when you have two sources moving at different speeds, creating different partials. And
you could also, I've experimented with incorporating the spatiality with the carpal strong algorithm as well, so that every speaker, every time it's repeated, it's passed on to the next speaker.
Beautiful.
And that gives interesting results, and then you can also experiment with having different delay times for each speaker as well. And
time compensation, the amplitude compensation, the Doppler, frequency modulation in the space domain, or amplitude modulation in the space domain, and so there are a lot of things to open up in there. That were probably not possible before without the control over very long arrays of signal like this one. Good. Thank you. I leave the floor now. Safe unplug.
So, a few minutes to switch over.
I'm going to bribe the students with chocolate.
Yes, again.
I'm still thinking about how it's going. Went to one speaker again.
As long as I get
It
the
wasn't.
first two.
Maybe it was some other error, because I can't believe that everything was cancelled like that. And
no, that's the Nyquist frequency what he said.
Many new faces, and I hope to get to know you better, those I don't know. Hans Peter, Stubbe Teglbjærg, working at the Royal Danish Academy of Music in Copenhagen, teaching electroacoustic composition. I've been part of all the workshops. There's been 3 workshops now, and I've been here every time, so it's a fine learning curve for everyone, including good teachers, I believe. As a matter of fact, you see the title here of what I'm going to speak about. It's part 2. I did part 1 last year, so I don't intend to repeat that. That actually had to do with sort of explaining the basics of the ambisonic principles. It's available as a PDF, and I will distribute that, so you can read it later on. This one I will also distribute, the part 2, and they go a little bit together. Like Alejandro said, well, he claimed he wasn't a seller of Super Collider, since it was for free. But I think actually he make up a very good seller, selling something which is for free, not charging money, of course, but your time, investment, attention. He did a good selling job there. I'm intending to sell you something also which is for free. We're in the free market. Everyone can try his luck. So this presentation, I'm mainly going to concentrate on this new set of plugins coming from the IEM. You already had a presentation during Matthias Kronlager's video conference. However, I wasn't there, but I was told it was sort of an overview or something. I intend to go into detail with certain aspects, and there are certain combinations that are really, really interesting that you should know about. It's very, very operational, I should say, very easy to use, so it's something to look into. I will also, if time permits, play a little bit of my music for the sphere, to present a little bit where I have my interests. That will of course be very, very short. So, when we talk about ambisonics, we immediately face the problem of choosing the right tools and the right methods. And if you're looking into the literature available on the web, you'll see these things mentioned. There are decoding methods with strange names, very often referred to in short. I try to give a short overview here what's available. There's actually much more, but these are the main features. There's two big areas. One is the decoding method itself, and the other is the weight. And I will explain a little bit later what these things are. I will try to exemplify what these things concern. Basically, we have tools of the second type, the all-round ambisonic decoder, the Olarte. It's available in the Ambix package and in the IEM package. In certain packages, like the SPAT 5, you have a very, very nice option that is to be able to choose between decoding methods. That's the only package I know of that has this option. All other packages seem to stick to one method or another. What is usually an option is the weight. There can be certain tools that inside the package allow you to choose the weight. And basically the weight is trying to describe like a polar pattern. If you try to locate the sound cells in certain space, you can think of it like a polar pattern for a microphone, and the weight is describing a little bit the shape of the polar pattern. Think of it like that. Very importantly, Natasha Barrett recommends a setting which unfortunately we cannot match here, but I mention it anyway, since she is a composer working with the type of sound material that we very often use as well, like complex sound sources, many layers, precise location, trajectories, everything together. She has found that the combination mentioned here, decoder method, the energy preserving, that's the one called EPAD, which we don't have, and the decoder type, max ray in phase, which in some cases we can have, and the crossover frequency for dual band decoding. I'll show you a little bit later what that means. We have also in some packages a choice there. It means basically there's a decoding taking place for the lower end of the spectrum and another for the high end of the spectrum. So that's the dual band idea. Yes, that's to begin with. I will go into Reba.
Excuse me, could you just repeat what you meant? Natasha had found out.
She had found out that this combination. Sorry, it's another key code. This combination here of methods, decoder type and crossover frequency, works the best for complex sound sources. And the details of why, she has an article describing it. Don't worry about this. I will distribute this PDF later on. So no, if you can't read it probably or so, and if I'm too fast, don't worry. But I think it's very important that composers report their experiences, that we get to know what are the tools that they prefer, and we can probably, after this workshop, also give voice to an opinion on the subject. I would show you what I'm in a way for you. I have the feeling. I will show you how some of it can be worked inside of Reaper. I'll use Reaper as the main frame here, but it doesn't exclude something like Max. Of course, these plugins can easily be loaded. They're VST plugins that can easily be loaded into Max as well. So, I will start a little bit by the configuration. This is what I'm talking about at this point. There's something called the Olarte decoder. It looks like this, and it gives you the option to specify the layout of your speaker system, and you type in the azimuth, that is the horizontal position, the elevation in degrees, and possibly radiation, given channel number to identify it, and you can also specify, which is an issue we will not discuss right now, whether this source, this loudspeaker, is real or virtual. It has been found that in some cases the ambisonic principle works better if, for example, in a case like here, we have a semisphere that we duplicate and make a virtual full sphere. That the calculation runs better, actually. Mm-hmm. This is also a report from Natasha Barrett and Markus Neustering from IRCAM, and that has given rise to this idea of virtual speakers. So if you really want it, you can see the spots here. The blue spots indicates where are the speakers. You could have underneath a virtual sphere. So this is something to verify. I haven't tested this idea, but it's an important remark anyway. So this is how it looks like. It's quite easy to use. It has in the upper left corner, that's the input specification. At the right upper corner is a number of channels going out. This is just the preset when the plugin is loaded. So it's 12 speakers, and it says S&D and auto first order. So you can have here, well, because of the 12 channels that are set here, I won't have up to first order really. I should have 0 first order, but I can have more, of course I can. So if I now change to another preset that I have made, so this is a configuration file of this space. I've taken the data coming from Matthias's Kronlager's preset that we use with the Ambix decoder and put them in here exactly as they are, and type everything very correctly, and you get a layout that looks like this. I have specified something called auto, so it automatically will configure itself to 5th order because of the preset and because of the number of channels that is available. It looks like this. A few things should be said. I realized that the important thing is really azimuth and elevation. Radiuses does not have any effect whatsoever. You can change that if you want. Normally they will be left 1. And that's because of the current algorithm does not really take distance to speakers into account. It really calculates an ideal sphere. And then it leaves to you to compensate for that on the hardware side. If, for example, like here, this is not an ideal sphere, it's an elliptical sphere because the room is a little bit longer than wide. So there is a little bit of delay on the side speakers on the hardware side to make it a full, nice round circle. It was very easy to check because I can see into the configuration file. It doesn't have any effect if I write 1, 10, 100, whatever on the radiuses. And I talk to the developers and they say no, there's no effect. You can leave it at 1. This comes maybe as a bit of a surprise at this time because we've been told what distance to the speaker is so very important. But it's all scaled, let's say, by the dimensions of your system. So it's an ideal sphere trying to map to it. If distances should be taken into account, what would be necessary is that the algorithm running behind would be able to calculate a delay to the actual speakers. And when you look into the configuration files, you see there's something called the ambisonic matrix. It's a huge matrix of numbers, and it's only giving gains for all the speakers of the various orders. So you have a long row. If there's 23 speakers, there will be 23 numbers, first order, first row, or zeroth order, first row, first. All the coefficients for the various components when you go into higher order. So it's actually it's at this stage it's a gain issue, the ambisonic panning that we have. There's no delay.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
It's not just a question about delay, but also amplitude compensation.
Yes.
If it's very much lower, say at the ceiling or something,
yes,
it's going to, if it's the same gain, it's going to be much louder to the sweet spot.
That's why you have to listen carefully to the presets and compensate. You're right about it. So the developer of these plugins, and it's the same for the Ampix package. It has the same. I don't know if it's a shortcoming, but feature, whatever. He says that it will require a new algorithm actually to calculate everything, and they're about to do it. The developer is called Daniel Rudrick. He's in Graz, writing his doctoral thesis on ambisonics.
Compensating for amplitude is no big deal.
No, but it's a part of they don't take radius into account. It's as simple as that. So it's an ideal sphere with equal radiuses in all directions, and we have to compensate, and that is probably part of the problems from time to time. We tend to, for example, in this room, the top tends to be very sensitive. Sounds very easily go into the top, maybe due to lack of compensation. Could be. I'm not sure. However,
these are very surprising.
Yes, but these are the facts. You can check the config files that are produced, and yes, I don't know any tool that can calculate the delay and the necessary compensation at this moment. As a matter of fact, there's something called the ambisonic decoder toolkit that it's like a Unix-based thing, which is used to create the config files used in the Ampix, for instance, and you can verify it doesn't change anything if you add radiuses or not. The matrix is completely looking the same. I did all that to be sure of it, and I was surprised too. I typed in all this information, thought now it's going to be right to the spot, but it's turned out not to do much. However, it's very practical still. This plugin, it's in the Ampix setting, you have to do this configuration, say offline, and load a preset. Now we're in real time. So all this, now you enter this stuff, and now you decode in real time. You can change anything you want here, except for radiuses. You can also export it and get a new type of configuration files in XML format, and that's quite handy. You can then, for instance, just use this, what's it called, the symbol decoder, which where you load a configuration file that has been created and then play with it. So these two at this moment should be equal. Let's listen to this. You're gonna hear this example over and over again today. So I'm playing a sound source, which you see here a little bit in the background. It's residing on a track with no effects whatsoever. I'm passing it through. I'm passing it through a stereo encoder, which is also configurable. So 2 channels in, and I set it to auto, so it will configure it, because the track is 36 channels, it will configure to 5th order. Now I can pan it, so, and this is then fed to the decoder here. It's a little loud. A little bit loud, sorry. So this is the real-time version of it, and this is the simple decoder. And should, in principle, sound exactly the same at this time. The one is more efficient, of course. I also have a visualizer. You will see this. I will be having this in the background all the time, so that's helpful. Okay. I definitely agree. Oh, sorry. This should not have. I definitely agree there is an issue about delays and volume. So amplitude panning, amplitude-based panning, we're now in Pro Tools, goes like this. You see here, very simple. It's a clavis sound, duck, 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 repeated, and I'm just having a volume graph going up for one speaker and down for another speaker. It's very, very simple. And you get sort of a movement. This is not equal power panning, so there's a bit of a dip in the middle. But this is a basic of panning, and there's a name for it. It's called interaural level difference. So the differences of levels arriving to our ears create an impression of a moving sound source. And of course, equally important, so we have a delay here. Let's see, I should open it up, be sure that things are right. So now it's the same sound source, just put, it's a mono source now, but put into a stereo effect. So I have, what do I have here? Full delay, precedence effect. Is there any precedence effect here? Sorry, I just need to make sure. Yes, there is. Okay, so this is a mono sound source putting into a delay. One is delayed by 5 milliseconds, the other is direct. And please tell me where you would locate the sound source. Sorry, it's a little bit loud. That's true. Let's get it to a reasonable level. Maybe like this. Yeah. So let's do the reverse. I delay the other 5 milliseconds and put this. Right. Yeah. Of course.
Also, I recognize it from the not so ideal place.
Yes, it's a very strong feature. So this has to do with the delay of the signal arriving at our ears. So there's a tiny delay. Our mental construction, our cognitive capacities are able to distinguish which sources arrive first and so on, and there's a kind of a masking effect taking place, so we give priority to the one arriving first, provided they have more or less the same content. So this creates also an impression of moving sound sources, and it's very, very important in, for instance, binaural rendering. Also, it would be in the ambisonic rendering as well. I believe this is an element missing. This is a key element missing. This is called interaural time differences, and you have these two things. These are we're talking about psychoacoustics now. These two are the fundamentals of psychoacoustics in a sense in terms of audio rendering. Please note the name of it, precedence effect. Very, very important phenomena, and something that has plenty of consequences when we start to talk about speakers. And there are many scenarios that we can imagine. What if the context is not quite the same in volume, not quite the same in timbre, and so on and so forth. So it starts to create other mental images. That will require another lecture because it's psychoacoustics, but it's very, very interesting. But please,
can I just point out that it's also a function of the distance between you and the loudspeakers?
Yes, the loudspeaker.
So this is not something you can generalize over a particular over all geometries.
No, that would be an issue if you try to include that into the ambisonic decoding process. That's true. It's a mental
So in a concert hall, it's going to be different from in a studio.
Yes.
Essentially.
So you need tools to be able to regulate these things. That's true. And at this point, we have very little tools actually. I haven't found much about it.
But what would be like a very precise measurement and convert that into milliseconds and delay each track.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's all and the angle. Yeah. So it's doable. It needs some calculation, but. Okay, this was a parenthesis in a sense, but to explain you what's going on, I will quit Pro Tools to save a little bit of power here. I will go back to this. There's a tiny issue here, which has to do particularly with this setup. You probably, those of you who are working in Reaper have seen this Ambic Rotator plugin. It's because the numeration of the speakers, number 1 is over there. And if I want to center this image with front here, there's an offset of 90 degrees, so I put that in. And it's a good example that the Ambics plugins and the IEM plugins work really well together. They're coming from the same concept. Yes. Yes.
Wouldn't it be easier to configure the decoder as that?
Could be, yes.
Yeah.
But
so
it's a kind of a that would shift a little bit probably the layout here, maybe the visual layout. But I think at this point it's easy to reference these kind of numbers. So we have a kind of a virtual number 1 here.
Okay.
I think of it like that when I pass this, and when you do like Alejandro did, addressing the speakers directly, then you have to know the numeration, of course, that the offset is there. So, yes, encoders. So we have, in this setup, we have a stereo encoder going into what is called the ambisonic bus, the green track over there that you sort of saw. And in this setting, I'll show you now a couple of examples. All the blue tracks, I will step through them and show you a little bit what the IM plugins can do. And then I'll be quick with the first couple of ones and then spend some time on room encoding and directivity. This is an interesting issue. It should be set, there's a stereo encoder. It works, it's really nice. Works like expected. The parameters of controls are called yaw, pitch and roll. So yaw is the horizontal. Pitch will be the, let's say, horizontal will be the, now the roll is this one. Then you have this one and you have the height. You can adjust the width of the speakers as well, or this stereo file, and so on. There is underneath something called quarter neons, and I think for now you can leave these. They are more, let's say, a mathematical description. You can either operate the yaw, pitch and roll or these ones. It's an alternative. They are used very much. They're used when there are examples of people making head tracking solution and binaural rendering, and they tend to operate these controls instead of the others. Sort of fits more into the head tracking formats that they have, but it's really cool, this one. There's of course a multi-encoder, multi-source, and you specify the number of sources. You can have up to 64 sources in one plugin. Here it's 5. It isn't really 5, but anyway, I only have 2. And you can position the 5 sources like you want to. And then there's a very neat feature here about the master. If you lock direction, then you just have to move the master and everything moves in tandem like a big flock. I can imagine a lot of stuff in such a situation here. Very, very simple. So you just have to actually, if it's horizontal layout, you just have to control the yaw of the master, which is really, really simple. If you go into Reaper and affects the LFO. It's just one parameter, you have the whole thing, the whole lot going around. It doesn't make sense to play it right now because I don't have 5 sources, but I'm sure you get the idea, yeah. Yeah?
How do you connect 5 sources?
There's
can you make a bus, for example? Or?
Yes, you can line them up in Reaper. There are features like if they are residing on individual tracks, you would make a submix and route each of them to the submix, and the submix would be a 5-source, a 5-channel audio. That's Reaper. This is something we can go through in practical lessons. It's not very complicated actually. Reaper is really flexible about number of tracks. I should be clear. Sorry, these are called tracks, but the number of channels inside the track are really flexible. It could be anything from, I think, 1 from monosource to 64. Yeah, handy. So that's. I think that will be enough for the encoding. I will go to another set of plugins, which are the compressor. There are two compressors. There is something called the Omni and something called the directional compressor. First of all, this track needs to be stereo encoded. Once again, I just leave it like that. And then we look a little bit on this one. So this Omni compressor, it compresses the signal according to the signal in the very first channel of your ambisonic signal here. So once the stereo file is being encoded, it outputs an ambisonic signal. And the very first channel of that is called the V. That is an Omni signal. And with that, everything else is being compressed. Hopefully I am able to show you this. So the uncompressed signal, and you see it's maybe not very evident here, but you see this red one shows the compression taking place. I can lower the level, have even more compression. Maybe this is becomes obvious now. So that's a very handy tool. It's like ordinary studio work. The controls that you find here are completely similar to what you find in an ordinary compressor, except behind the curtains it's working on an ambisonic signal. It's multi-channel. You don't have to. This is one of the things that I have encountered in my own work. When you want to exploit, let's say, standard effects on ambisonic signals, it's possible. It's in no way prohibited, but usually many of them are stereo effects, so it requires many instances, and you have to go over them, linking their parameters to have the same settings, and it's kind of tedious. It makes up for big Reaper projects. Here it's very simple and straightforward.
Excuse me, then the signal comes from the B format into the compressor? Or
it comes from the sound source that you see. It's over there. This guitar riff. It's and that's a totally clean track. There's nothing on it. This routes directly into this track 6, and so this is being stereo encoded first, like we saw before, and then that signal is actually, it's a stereo input. It says 2 channels, and the output is a 5th order ambisonic signal, and you see also the number of, it's 36 channels being passed from the stereo encoder to this one, straight 1-to-1.
But did it do some difference when for instance, I first have the sound file or the input, then I have, for instance, mono or stereo compressor, and then I specialize that. So
hard to say. In the normal place of the Omni compressor would be actually, some sort of a mastering idea that you put it on the ambisonic bus to control the general signal. For everything.
For the master.
Yeah. So I think that's the purpose of this compressor. in ordinary cases, of course, you can treat your audio any way you like, or the stereo track, do all the ordinary operations, and then go into the ambisonic domain. That's true. Here, I have another called the directional compressor, and this is actually already much more in the direction of what you're asking. So this is a compressor that is active according to its position to the source position in space. So you can make a point that is more compressed than another point. This is the idea of the directional compressor, and I think this is has a great potential. So let's see. We will listen to this. Sorry for this example here. So I made a compressor setting here. It's a dual compressor, but one is off, and it's a little bit active, but it will become much more active at certain positions. So going around, it's being compressed, being compressed, being compressed, and being uncompressed. So
how do you choose where it's less compressed and where it's more?
You position this one. These two goes together, so you can position the sound source. You can make it omnidirectional. That's another feature. But if I position it over here, for example, this should be the loudest part. Actually, seems to be swapped. Right, it's over there, and then going forward. So there's a connection there, and I think this is quite interesting. The terminology that they have proposed is that what you're creating, in a sense, you're creating a mask, a spatial mask. So there's a kind of an envelope, let's say, covering the sound at its position, and then the compression works according to that mask. Of course, they have also something called an unmask, the opposite, everything which is not compressed. And you can this other setting here, I've asked that we listen to the unmasked. So let's make sure that I will put this back. So this is sender. Will it work? It is a tiny. It's the second one here. So the louder point in the other compression should be a little bit softer here. I think I should lower, maybe lower the threshold here to get a signal compression going on. The idea of these things is that you can alternate signals with a compressor. So masking is you can think of it like compression docking and expanding. So if you have signals going in and out of each other, an alternation, that could be maybe very interesting. You could, just a very stupid idea, maybe have a main material like an instrument, vocalist, something which whenever she appears, the other one ducks away, and create alternation with the tools. This is classical effects, let's say, but in the domain of ambisonic treatments. Yeah. I hurry on. I have a feeling I'm a little bit using too much time here. Dual delays are, this is a delay also in the ambisonic domain. There's nothing really extraordinary here. We have a delay time up to 500 milliseconds, and then we have a yaw. And that is probably where it becomes interesting. There's also standard controls like the feedback. There's a cross feedback. This is channel crossing, so you feed channel 1 to channel 2 and vice versa. And there's an output mixer here. So these are nice tools. There's a spectral filter. This is simply just a bandpass filter, but spectrally made with a low frequency and a high frequency. The thing about this one So just having a straight so you see settings here, two delays, creating this. The thing is that about this one is that delays can be positioned with the yaw. So this is also something that would require extra work if you did that, putting the delay on, let's say, earlier on in the chain. So I can spread it out and have delays going in different directions. I leave it a little bit to you to explore. There's a second example here, which I hope will work. Notice there's an LFO and a rate. So actually, the delay can be moved, can be optimized, so it moves around. And this is an idea actually proposed by Mathias Kronlager last year, I think, already. He had a realization of that inside of Reaper itself. Now someone has taken up that idea and put it into a proper working plugin. So here I'm only engaging one of the delays. Delay 2 is put to 0, it's put to sleep. And short delay, short degrees of shifting, and the LFO rate will go at 1 Hertz and the depth at 1 millisecond. So it's going to shift slowly with the delay, and there's a feedback. It's going to attenuate very, very slowly. I hope I can make it work. So I stop playing, and you should look to the visualizer, and the sound should be somehow moving a little bit around. The delays are only attenuating very, very slowly. So I think sorry, we will stop this one. Okay. Presses, delays. Yes. So let's. This is now a different issue as well. I would like to talk about the room encoder and about reflections now. I'm going to spend a little more time on that. First of all, you should know there is also an ambisonic reverb. A very simple one, but good sounding one. We could listen to that as well. So. Sorry, I missed the stereo encoding, of course. So the reverb and the dry signal. And you see there's no configuration here. It simply automatically configures itself according to the signal it receives. So it's very, very simple to use, and it has settings that you would probably find in many. It's an algorithmic, as far as I understand, an algorithmic reverb and not a convolution. So the settings can be controlled like in classic reverbs. Yes.
About like, is it better to use or what is the difference between using a reverb on the stereo file or using this one?
I think this can, if used properly, can reflect a position in space. You know, actually the room encoder is a more elaborate version of that idea. The big difference of making ambisonic reverbs is that the reflection patterns would reflect where the sound source is positioned in the space. If you put reverb, normal stereo reverb on the sound source, there's not this localization of the sound source. Then you actually will somehow expand that stereo space and multiply onto this bigger one. In this case, you are able to create reflections according to where you have your sound source, and I think this is the idea of the ambisonic reverb and where there is a difference. So I'm not sure about. I think this is more evident with the room encoder actually.
Right.
Yes.
But it wouldn't work using stereo. That would be the wrong kind of reverb.
Yeah, you can't. No, it's not completely wrong. But the way that reverb has been handled in ambisonic until now is mainly through convolution reverbs. So there's a tool for that in the Ampix plugin. It's actually not the Ampix, it's the MCFX package. There's a convolution engine, and that would require that you have impulse responses, many impulse responses, in order to work. It works really nicely if you have those impulse responses, but I'm not sure they have been made, for example, for here. And so it's not completely wrong, but you have to. It's a difference between creating a space that sound sources reside in, or creating a space that where you really move also the reverb together with the sound source. Okay. Stereo encoding, or the room encoder, sorry. We have seen the stereo encoder. So in this case, let me see, I undo the stereo encoder. So in this case, the room encoder accepts directly as a sound source. So it's an encoder, like the name says. You don't need to have a stereo encoder first. That wouldn't work. Then you have tools to specify the dimensions of your room. The XYZ is an alternative way to position your sound source and a listener position, XYZ, and some reflection properties that you can handle there too. It's a little bit of a filter, so you can attenuate or increase the gain like you want to. And very importantly, there's a number of reflections, so many reflections will require more CPU. I think I will lower it to some reasonable amount, and we should be good to go. So now my positioning is done here, and you realize there's a kind of a wobbling. If I try to do, I'm going into audio rate. I'm in trance now. There is a Doppler effect built into this one. So this, what you hear is the Doppler. So if you optimize these parameters, go smoothly. Or if you don't, there's no way to disengage the Doppler here. It's automatically built in. There's a neat feature here called synchronization room settings. So the idea is that generally one room encoder per sound source. So you have many room encoders, and if they should share the same room settings, you can use the synchronized room setting to achieve that. So you give it a number, call it number 1. This is an ID, and all the instances of the room encoder that has this number will have the same settings, and any change in either of them will be reflecting in the other ones. So you can have 4 different rooms, so you can have rooms within the room and so on. This is in the simple case, the room encoding. There's another really neat connection, and this is something new. I don't think we have as clear-cut tools in the Ampix plugins. I know I'm running a little bit late here, but I started late also. I will continue, especially to finish this one. This is a major issue. Shaping of directivity, meaning that we can shape better where does the sound come from, is a big issue really in the ambisonic, working with ambisonics. And now we have tools to do so. The configurations that you see here, I will run over them. But in order to explain just a little bit about directivity, I've created another example. So this is a stereo recording from the island where I live. There's a lot of partying and folk music, so this is from a ball, folk music and playing, and lots of drunk people all over the place. It's a mid-side recording, so what you see in the upper track is the mid signal. It's been distorted slightly, it's very flat, it's gained a little bit too much, but didn't disturb the signal really. And the second track is the side signal. So in order to work with this, I want to transform that recording into an ambisonic signal that I can manipulate by the gray plugin in the middle. And in order to achieve that, I have two small plugins here. First, I have to convert the MS signal to an ordinary left-right signal. I'm using a free plugin here. And then from another package called ATK, I encode this signal into what is called super stereo, which is a proper ambisonic signals, except there's no height. So it's everything but height. So left, right, front, back, but nothing in the height. And of course, there couldn't be. I don't have any height information in the recording. But the output from this plugin is 4 channels, and they feed directly into the gray plugin as a B format. There's no need to do anything. So this is the signal chain, and this is how it sounds. Coming up here. I will lower the volume a little bit so I can speak in the meantime. So this plugin to able to shape the directivity a little bit. So there's a fader here allowing me to gradually go between polar patterns, let's say virtual microphone patterns. This is really handy. So this is the omni signal, the less directive. This is a figure of 8, the most directed. And the sound source should be really clearly located up here. Now, I also have something called the width here. And now I can actually separate left and right. And what I'm doing is now I'm not just panning things now. I'm like a microscope. I'm looking into my sound file and looking to what's on the sides. Now I put my microphones on the side of the signal, and you get a little bit less music and a little bit more of drunk people talking, a little bit more music and dancing, a little bit less people, and go forth and back. So I'm exploring the inside of my recording here. And it becomes very evident here at the end, actually. Yeah. Good. This is directivity in the ambisonic field. So back to this this plugin. I'll give you 3 examples. It works together with a room encoder really well. So the idea is that you put up first a directivity shaper and then a room encoder. And the directivity shaper, it gives an ambisonic signal. It's in a sense encoded ambisonically, and the room encoder needs to understand that. So it needs to be differently configured than, for example, compared to the other room encoder, where it just simply put in a mono source. So there's a neat difference here. And also note, I'm going to very high orders here. In a sense I'm oversampling very much the signal, but that's due to this fellow. So let's listen to it. The first example here is, the idea is you have 4 bands, and these bands, it's like an equalizer. Each band can have a different directivity, and you can think of those as a little bit like a panning, but on the top of the panning or positioning, you can add polar patterns like the one that I just showed in the previous examples. The polar patterns are controlled here by the order and shape. So typically the lower band I put all the way down to an omni. So that's gonna reproduce over all the speakers. And the upper band, which is the red one, very high. And you see some names here: basic, maxi, in-phase. These are, I'm going back to what I showed in the beginning, these are the weights, the decoding types that are available. They affect the polar patterns and, in sense, the directivity of that signal. So if I go, this is actually meant to be This is quite directive, but has a lot of side lobes. You see the red side lobes, so it might not be very precise in lower order. And to avoid side lobes, you have, there's all these different weight things, and you could, it's like changing the polar patterns. You can go towards something which is without side lobe but still directional, and it would work better in higher orders. How high orders is a matter of listening. I've set it to automatically 7. I could set it to 5, which is actually the output that I have. So then in that case, this area becomes red. So see here, I have orders listed here. And there's no idea in moving inside of that area. I should move the dots inside the gray area. Also note that the orders here are the smooth transitions. So you actually, we have something called fractional orders, which is a new concept, but fractionals are very helpful to create different directivities. So I'm going back to Auto 7. Like for the multi encoder, there's a hook here. I can move it around, so now everything moves in tandem, and that's because I have a lock here. I start to position the various parts of the sound with a different directivity, and depending on how localized I want the sound to be, I can start to move these things. If I want it a little bit everywhere, is this correct? Yes, it should be correct. So again, this is kind of a master. They call it the probe. If you engage the lock directions, this is got to move in tandem. So it's a different kind of specialization with the directivity included into the signal. Let's move on to a different example. Now we finally skip this thing here. So this is this is a bass clarinet multiphonic. So I try to isolate, because it has it's like overblowing gradually, the multiphonic. So I try to isolate the various pitch regions. So when it passes certain frequency, I position them, and then, like the Leslie speaker, I made them rotate. I automated the yaw of the probe using reverbs built in LFO here. So I made some settings to change this quite slowly, and so we should have a sound that when the overblowing appears, the different parts should appear a little bit differently everywhere. I will raise the volume here. In working with this, I found it's very helpful to bring signals down to Omni to get an idea how much signals do I actually have to work with, and then gradually increase and find a position that pleases me. This is a practical information. I would. It's very easy to make a Leslie speaker, by the way, Leslie simulation here. Let's go to the final example here. That's this one. Come on. This is a. Oh, sorry. This is a voice recording. We could sort of fit it in here. Yes, just barely. So the little bit the same idea here applies, but just that this is a speaking voice. But I thought it could be interesting, so to try to isolate with the 4 filters, to try to isolate the voice part. Whoa. What is the nasal, the color of the voice, and the hiss and the sibilants in different parts of this voice, and project them differently. So you see, I've found, simply experimenting, found that some should be more broad, some should be really narrow. And it goes like this. Wait a minute, is it engaged? Yes.
The blood is secret. The blood is secret.
Yeah.
The blood is secret. The blood is secret. The blood
So
is
I
secret.
can try to demonstrate. So this is what I have in the lower band, and then I find an appropriate place to it. This is what I have in the middle band. This is what I have there. So those of you working with voice, start to think of a voice projected in space differently. Yes, reflections, directivity. So I invite you to use these tools. I don't know if they're installed. They're free, and I'd be happy to assist. I should mention the guys who are exploring these things. They have also proposed a student 3D audio production competition. I think this is maybe relevant for you. So you can, once you've been here, maybe propose your work to be included in this. This is in Cologne, Germany, and I think the deadline is somewhere in June. And 4 minutes of short work. And I know some students participated last year and had a great experience actually. So this is with regard from Daniel Rudrick. He sent me this link and said, "Could you please pass this on? I will pass you the link if you like to." So this was the IEM blocks. There's a few other tools, but I won't show them right away. But there's something interesting coming up. I think this is on their drawing board. They have one called matrix multiplication. So they intend to make a tool that can warp spaces. So all the gain stages will be multiplied by certain factors, and you can sort of warp the space, contract it, and put it up, put it low, and so on. So the space as a complete, the sound field as a complete entity. There's a few other tools like a toolbox that should be able to convert between various formats, but as times go on, there's less and less need for that. Those of you who have heard about, the ambisonic B format and so on, there's an issue about the channel order. It can be frustrating when you start to mix plugins from various packages. You need to take that into account. This is going to be less and less needed. The new plugins refer to the same standard and will be helpful for us. Good. Time is a little bit up, I'm afraid. I had actually the intention to play you a little bit of a piece of mine. Maybe I'll make it short. We should go for lunch soon. So this is a piece made in this very room in December and January. It's called Spherical Bridge, and what you see here, this image, it's a spectrum. It's a it's a sonogram of a recording that I made in New York. I took a walk with my Sony recording device on the Williamsburg Bridge, running from Lower East Side, Manhattan, to Williamsburg in Brooklyn, recording everything along the way, and use this as a kind of an image, mental image, compositional concept of the piece that you start in one village, go over a bridge, pass a lot of water, and end somewhere else. It consists of 6 sections. The first is called, what is it called? It's written up here. Ascending and Morning Light. The second is Windy and Sparks of Peace. Third section, Flying and Splitting Tunnel. There's actually a train tunnel running underneath the bridge, and you can hear that from time to time. I got sound of trains passing me while I walked. And there's a moment of chaos where you start to hear lots of audio, lots of cars, vans, motorbikes, and so on. And the bridge is I've sort of in my mind I sort of wanted to break the bridge. It wasn't possible, of course. And then there's a descent and going into the night at the end. So this is the form. We just have a sniff of it from the end. I calibrated it earlier, so I hope it will work. This is not being using the new plugins. This is using the Ampix package, and a lot of other stuff went into the work. The Harpix plugins from Norway, the ATK package. I have many B format recordings of traffic from New York and all kinds of stuff going into the recording. What you see here is just a stereo recording from the walk. So in a sense, it's a sound walk projected out. So. why you had that jump, sorry, it's because this thing was not selected properly. You just have to go from there.
Så kom jeg ned af Vilnius Bridge, som jeg er gået for den sidste gang. Nu skal jeg lige finde Market Station, så jeg kan komme hjem ad. Det tror jeg går. Højt og en kæmpe kig ud over floden rundt om han. Jeg kan ikke huske det ned. Så flot.
Thank you very much.